Alright, so, as promised, I am now officially going to review the third story of the Hartnell era, The Edge of Destruction. So, let's get it started. Okay. The Doctor, while attempting to correct the TARDIS's faulty navigation circuits, causes a small explosion. Ugh. The Doctor, Barbara, Ian, and Susan are all temporarily rendered unconscious. After they awake, Ian and Susan appear to have slight cases of amnesia, and everyone begins to act strangely. Unexpected events are happening in the TARDIS. The travelers are becoming suspicious of each other's motives, and the Doctor even accuses Ian and Barbara of sabotage. Fearing that they have been taken over by some alien force, or that they have intentionally sabotaged the TARDIS in order to force the Doctor to return them to 1963, he drugs Barbara and Ian, unknowing that Ian is also suspicious and has not taken the drink given to him. The Doctor attempts to explore the problem without interference. Gradually becomes clear that the strange events are an attempt by the TARDIS itself to warn the crew that something is wrong. Thanks to Barbara's clue gathering, the Doctor traces the problem to a broken spring in the fast return switch. The malfunction is causing the TARDIS to head back to the beginning of time. The strange events were just the TARDIS's attempt to warn its passengers before the ship is destroyed. Fixing the switch brings all back to normal. Although the day is saved, Barbara is still affected by the Doctor's harsh words earlier. The Doctor is forced to do what he least enjoys: apologize, and admit that he is wrong without Barbara and Ian. The story closes with the TARDIS materializing on a snowy landscape, where Susan spots a giant footprint in the snow. Ta-da-don! This serial introduces the idea that the TARDIS console and Time Lord directly harness the engines which drive the ship, and that the TARDIS is quote-unquote alive and somewhat self-aware. That's very interesting when you think about it. This story explicitly states that the Doctor and Susan have visited other worlds before 1963 Earth. Susan mentions that 4 or 5 journeys back they had visited the planet Quinis, where the TARDIS had almost been lost. Excuse me. The Doctor's extensive wardrobe is first mentioned at the end of the story, with Ian showing off an ulster that the Doctor had received from Gilbert and Sullivan. The mispronunciation of Ian's last name that began the previous story, the Daleks, is used in this episode to signify that everything has returned to normal after the climax. Here the Doctor calls Ian Charterhouse. When Ian examines the injured Doctor, he remarks that his heart seems alright, meaning that this is before the whole Doctor having 2 hearts thing, which was brought up in the third Doctor's first story, Spearhead from Space. This story was edited by story editor David Whitaker within 2 days. It was created as a hasty filler so that the story would fit a 13-episode run, which was all that had been granted at that stage. Budgetary restrictions meant that the only 4 regular actors in the TARDIS sets could be used for the filming. Patty Russell was originally assigned to direct this serial, but she was unavailable for recording dates, so Morven Pinfield was suggested as her replacement. Richard Martin in the end was chosen, but he was unavailable for the second episode, so Frank Cox had to take over. The episodes were recorded in Lime Grove Studio D during the 17th and 24th of January 1964. The fast return switch label on TARDIS console appears to be written in felt-tip pen. Exactly why this was done is uncertain. On the DVD, documentary designer Raymond Cusick, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, guesses that it was written during rehearsals as a guide, and producer Verity Lambert surmises that it may have been written so that Hartnell could find the switch. Both agree, however, that the label was probably never intended to be seen. Caroline Ford states that she and William Hartnell labeled controls on the TARDIS control panel during rehearsal and assumed they would be blotted out before production. The 2 episodes of the serial had individual titles. They were, respectively, The Edge of Destruction and The Brink of Disaster. As was the case with other early Doctor Who serials, there were differences of opinion as to the appropriate umbrella title for the serial. Various titles over the years include Inside the Spaceship, Beyond the Sun, The Brink of Disaster, and, finally, The Edge of Destruction. This serial was recommended by Charlie Ann Anders of IO9 as an example of the classic series for new viewers to watch, describing it as, quote, a quick hit and still just as intense as it was 40 years ago. Radio Times reviewer Patrick Mulkern described writer David Whitaker as, quote-unquote, a master of dialogue, characterization, and atmosphere, but felt he struggled with plot logic as evidenced by the fast returns towards explanation. Despite this, he stated that the ending had charm because the TARDIS travelers had begun to become friends. And I agree with that. DVD Talk's John Sinnott felt The Edge of Destruction was the weakest serial of the program thus far, writing that it had some good moments, but overall doesn't hang together quite as well as the preceding two stories. He commented that it felt rushed and that the resolution was a cop-out that failed to explain why the characters were acting so strangely. David G. Howe and Stephen James Walker considered the second episode to be far better than the uncertain first episode, and that overall, considering its origins as hasty filler written to bring the initial episode count up to 13, Inside the Spaceship works remarkably well. Tad Wood and Lawrence Miles point out the theatrical influence on the story, drawing particular attention to Luigi Pirandello's 6 characters in search of an author, and that the point of the story is to lead the audience to think that it's a story about an alien presence infiltrating the TARDIS in order to pull off the twist that the ship is actually conscious. Nevertheless, they suggest that the story's real point, to cheaply fill 2 episodes at a time when it wasn't clear the show would be renewed, is rather more evident. So, yeah, that's pretty much that's Destruction for you. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, of course, this is not the first instance in Doctor Who in which there was story that only had 2 episodes. But let's just say we'll get to those episodes, or that particular story, later on down the line. Anyway, now, personally, even though I haven't really seen this episode, from what I've heard, it's actually pretty good, and I might check it out sometime. So overall, what would I give this story? Well, even though it's only 2 episodes, I feel it deserves better, so I'm going to give it a score of 3 sonic screwdrivers out of 5. Well, that's it for now. Join me next time when I review the very first historical episode of the show, Marco Polo. Until then, this is the Whooping Queen saying, "Oh my giddy aunt, when I say run, run, I've reverse polarity neutral flow. Would you like a jelly baby? Fantastic. Allons-y, Geronimo!" Bow ties are cool, vests are cool, and Stetsons are cool.